So, when we meet for the next class, I want you to come having read Art of Fiction. Now, Art of Fiction is an essay by Henry James, which is about the art of writing a novel. So, this is something that I suggest that all of you come having read it. It is freely available on the net. You won't have any problem accessing it. Art of Fiction. Henry James was also one of the foremost literary critics, and therefore his uh, important or significance of his position in American literature, in English literature, because he is one of the premier critics, literary critics as well. He had written prolifically on the art of writing, how a work of art should be constructed and how it should be judged. He has written several hundreds of essays on literary criticism. He has written several hundreds of literary reviews. So, how a work of after what's the function of criticism? We judge a work of art. So, that is what he did, and that is what that is why we are more interested in Henry James than any other writer of his generation. We were talking about London as a setting in Henry James, but before that I will again refer to Henry James and his interest in characterization. As we have been talking about, characters are more important. Character is destiny in Henry James, and one key feature is, I do not know if you have come across this feature in whatever you have read of Portrait of a Lady, that how characters talk to each other, how they communicate with each other. See, they talk a lot. They talk and talk and talk a lot. There are lengthy, I mean, there is a particular passage where you find 3-page monologue by Madame Merle. She talks and talks and talks about how she views the entire arrangement, how she, about her own life, Isabel Archer's admiration of Madame Merle, and how Madame Merle advises the younger girl on how to go about with her life. So, there are 3 pages, just one character talking, and it is not just random talk, but characters intellectualize. So, this was one of the seminal features of his characterizations. They are intellectuals, they are able to intellectualize, they are shorn of sentimentality, emotionalism that was so prevalent in the 19th century novel. In this way, he is one of the foremost modernists. That is what we are in. We have been talking about this trait of Henry James from the beginning. Remember, modernism, interiority, psychological understanding of characters. We keep going back to these factors again and again. How he intellectualizes. And one of the difficulties of reading Henry James is the way, the extent to which he intellectualizes his characters, because people generally are not used to, they read a novel more for entertainment. Of course, Henry James also wrote many of his novels in serialized forms, but the one reason why he is not so popular today as compared to let us say Jane Austen or Charles Dickens is because the way his characters intellectualize every decision, every act or every behavior or every attitude, every feeling is discussed and intellectualized. Okay. In this way, he was heavily influenced by the Europeans, the European writers. We have already talked about who were the influences. Remember the very first class. No, do not turn the pages back. You should remember by now. Yes? Ibsen, yes, but Ibsen is a dramatist. The novelists, who were the novelists? George Eliot, yes. Balzac, Flaubert, okay, and also Turgenev, Dostoevsky. Remember, so all these names we have been talking about, and what kinds of writers are these? They are the writers of psychological reality, um, and people who are instrumental in turning the so called realistic novel into more in a, steering it more into the realms of modernism. Okay, so those are the authors who influence. Therefore, the so called obscurity, why is he so difficult to understand? And also the the so called slowness of Henry James. Why do we find, why we find the pace lacks many a time in a Henry James novel? Because people talk a lot about, they comment on themselves. This is, so I am just reading. Do you have access to the yeah, please can you look at it, where he says at one point, preface to the lady. I have always fondly remembered a remark that I heard fall years ago from the lips of Ivan Turgenev in regard to his own experience of the usual origin of the fictive picture. It began for him almost always with the vision of some person or persons. What do you understand? I will move on. Who hovered before him, soliciting him as the active or passive figure, interesting him and appealing to him just as they were and by what they were. He saw in them in that fashion as disponibles. Do you get that? No? You didn't get that? Preface. Preface. Which page could it be for you? Not the first, you have to scroll down a bit. Saw them subjects to the chances, the complications of existence, and saw them vividly, but then had to find for them the right relations, those that would most bring them out, to imagine, to invent and select and piece together the situations most useful and favorable to the sense of the creatures themselves. What is he saying? Characters. So, first of all, a writer should have a vision of the kinds of people he wants to write about. So, it is not like this is a plot, I am more interested. Many a time writers will tell you in creative writing classes, this is something very often people will tell you, think of the broad outline, what you want to write about. Okay. That was not the case with Henry James. A character comes. Okay. And this is the advice that Turgenev gave to him, that think of a person and then build how would this kind of a person act in such kind of a situation. Now, who is the most interesting character in the Portrait of a Lady? Most likable, lovable, interesting?
Ralph.
Ralph. Okay, why do you like Ralph so much?
He's very down to earth.
Okay.
He's kind of the voice of reason, sort of, for Isabel.
So, you have a kind of relatedness with Ralph Touchett, that this is how a reasonable, sensible person would respond to someone like Isabel, okay, or to the situation or to the surroundings. Now, what does Henry James do here? Okay, so, yeah, fine. So, Ralph Touchett is one of the most likable characters. He is selfless. One of the reasons we like him so much is because he knows he is a dying man. Is he? Is he a dying man? He suffers from a certain ailment. Okay, he has weak lungs. Perhaps his father is also dying. The banker, his father has been ill for a very long time. Right? Okay, so Isabel walks in this setup from America to England. Remember, these people are also Americans, but they have been in England for decades together. And the wife, now this Ralph's mother and Mr. Touchett's wife, Isabel's aunt, she is the one who is instrumental in bringing Isabel from America. Albany? Which city does she come from? Yes, Albany. Okay, so she is Isabel is brought from Albany to England. Do you remember? Have you read the novel? Yes. Okay. Because some of you look quite blank to me. So she is brought from there to this, but these people have been in England for a very long time. Okay. So you have, and did you find it interesting that Mrs. Touchett spends a substantial amount of her time in Europe? Why?
She has that independent streak that Isabel is supposed to.
She's separated from her husband.
Not exact, no, not at all.
They stay together, but she chooses to spend most of her time in.
And therefore, her contact with Madame Merle and old Europe. Most of the time she is in Europe. Okay, but why this kind of separation?
She's also, I think, financially independent. She puts her own investments in which are not related to her husband.
So don't you find that very interesting that we are talking about late 19th century where women are given that sort of independence. So in that way Henry James anticipates the so called feminist revolution. Okay. A woman, she is not legally separated from her husband at all, right? She is not. But her husband has financially supported her in such a way that she can set up an independent establishment in Europe, right? Okay. So she is able to sustain on her own, and she is a master of her own destiny and comings and goings. She has the right to bring anyone who she wants, her late sister's daughters, to this household, and she tries to fix her up with some people in England and all, in that English society and all. She has that kind of. So what are we talking about? Movement between continents, and a single woman. She is not separated, but she has the choice to live independently, and she has her own means to survive. Don't you think that's something very revolutionary that James is talking about? It may not appear revolutionary to you now, but think of those times. Yeah, a woman being in her age, at her age, being able to travel so much, being able to interact with foreigners of all sorts, and then being so independent that she doesn't even need, she just wants to come once in a while and look after the establishment in England. Otherwise, no, she lives on her own. She can survive and manage very well on her own. Husband is suffering not from because of separation from his wife, definitely no. This is a sort of loveless marriage. Yeah. Okay, so it's a loveless marriage, but it's a marriage. So you don't break a marriage, you stay married. Yeah, because divorce was not an option. So socially speaking, a woman can stay separately from her husband, still being married. Okay, it may be a loveless marriage. So I'm just giving you the social context. Okay, it's also the time of industrial revolution. It's also the time of women's liberation, education, and all those movements happening in America, in Europe. Okay, but divorce was not an option. When Isabel gets into a loveless marriage, absolutely out of choice, and she decides to stick to the, I'm being, this is a spoiler, I'm giving you what happens next. So she enters into this marriage with whom? Gilbert Osmond. Okay. Now Gilbert Osmond and her marriage, that's another setup altogether. But then she stays married with him, although she realizes very early on that this is not going to work very well for her. This is not going to work out very well for her, but she stays married. What kind of a social situation Henry James is talking about? What characters are these? If characters are so important to him, what sorts of characters are these? Okay, so these things, so yeah, he is interested. So there are two things that are very essential, let us understand, in Jamesian universe: money, okay, and things that money brings along. So what does money bring? Rukma, what would you do if you have, $700 million today? What would you do with that?
Travel.
Okay. So, money brings travel, some kind of physical mobility. It also leads towards social mobility. So, that is a time when people were social aspirants, aspiring to move socially from one class to another. Okay. Americans could do that because it is a new world. Could Europeans do that? Not as freely. Okay. So, Europe is seen as a dying civilization. Okay. Perhaps that is what he is trying to draw our attention to. A dying man, Ralph Touchett, and our heroine first of all comes into contact with this kind of a family. Very nice, very lovable people. Mr. Touchett, a dying old man. Ralph Touchett, a dying young man. Okay. And Mrs. Touchett living in a loveless dying marriage. All Europe. And in walks this very young, very fresh, wide-eyed kind of a girl. Okay. And also Lord Warburton, what does he represent? Nobody likes him. Ashmita, any brownie points for Lord Warburton? Yeah. And there is a passage in the novel where Ralph Touchett goes on and on about what kind of a woman would refuse Lord Warburton. Okay, so can't you find any redeeming features in him? What does he represent? Yeah? Okay, English nobility and what? What else?
Passion, yeah, the sentimental, the revolution that's taking place, how the nobility suddenly realize that they are dying and they will.
Does he say that? Yes. So therefore his political aspirations. So he wants to join politics very actively, right? There is a reference there where he talks about this. He wants an intelligent kind of a wife, and he wants intellectual kinds of conversation because he has political aspirations. Now, why? Because he is very well aware that his is a dying tribe. Lord Warburton is definitely not dying, but English as aristocracy. We are living in that point of civilization where aristocracy is dying. Yeah, new social order is emerging. Okay, and therefore people like Lord Warburton, they know that very soon they will be like relics of the past. So they need someone more young, more dynamic, more full of fresh ideas, and therefore a person like Isabel Archer. Okay, so everything is dying, decaying, and she represents. So old Europe dying, decaying, and withering away, whereas we get this young person who is full of energy, vitality. How does her aunt describe her at the beginning? There is a scene where Ralph Touchett says that, how did you get this very charming, very lovely creature? Where did you get her from? As if she is an object. Mother, you have just come in and you have brought this very charming creature with you. How did you find her? It's like she is like a toy or a piece of art somewhere, and mother brought her home. Okay, and what does she say? I am on chapter 5 now. Chapter 5, please. Chapter 5, a couple of pages down. Mother is asking, do you think her so very pretty? And Ralph Touchett says, very pretty indeed, but I don't insist upon that. It's a general air of being someone in particular that strikes me. Who is this rare creature, and what is she? Where did you find her, and how did you make her acquaintance? Are they related? Yes, they are related, and he is talking about his cousin in terms as if, how did you become acquainted with this creature? So you can see that perhaps there is very little mobility, okay, and very little interest, but in Americans there is still some kind of a curiosity and willingness to move. And what does the mother say? I found her in an old house at Albany, almost like a fairy tale, right? In an old house like Sleeping Beauty, sitting in a dreary room on a rainy day reading a heavy book and boring herself to death. She didn't know she was bored. But when I left her, no doubt of it, she seemed very grateful for the service. You may say, I shouldn't have enlightened her, I should have let her alone. There is a good deal in that, but I acted conscientiously. I thought she was meant for something better than just reading books. Okay. Now, what sort of a character emerges of Isabel?
Someone who does not know what is good for her.
Are you sure?
That's what Mrs. Tajat evidently thinks of.
This is what she implies. But
She doesn't know what she's missing. She doesn't know that she could do better than just sitting and reading books.
okay, but she is definitely reading books. Okay, and this for women of that era, this is again, now this is Henry James's kind of a woman, okay, who reads heavy book, maybe some German philosophy, Kant and Hegel, who knows. Okay, so those are heavy books because she is definitely not reading a magazine or Harper's Bazaar's column or serialization of some David Copperfield. Okay, she is definitely reading a heavy book and she does not even realize that how boring it is for a young woman to just spend her time reading books. So, in a way I did her a big favor. I told her that get up and look at the world. So, what character is it? What sort of a character is it?
Benevolent.
Louder please.
Benevolent.
You are talking about Mrs. Touchett, I am talking about Isabel's character. She does not know what is good for her, but she is also intellectually inclined. At one point, I do not know exactly which chapter or where it comes, but I have been reading the novel recently again, rereading it, and it occurs that Isabel is the kind of woman very few men would dare to approach, okay, because they feel that in order to approach her in Albany, it is a small town, one has to be prepared with something. Now, what does it mean? It is not enough that you are young and you have a substantial amount of wealth and fortune, that is not enough for her. When you go and try to strike a conversation, you have to be prepared. What does it mean? She is intellectually intimidating. Okay.
Brother-in-law mentions that she ought to marry a Portuguese or an Armenian or someone who's a foreigner will be better for her than someone from their circles because nobody in their circles is intellectually stimulating.
Well, isn't that very interesting? It's good that you brought it up, Rukma, because there is a point where she says, I can't tell you which exactly which chapter, yeah, chapter 18th, chapter 18th. This is exactly what you are talking about. Now, we have been talking about what an impression Madame Merle creates on Isabel. So, we are already into that, Madame Merle and Isabel, chapter 18, right? Are you there? A couple of pages down, and Isabel inclined to range herself in the last category. Madame Merle had thick fair hair. Got it? Madame Merle had thick fair hair. Got it? All right. Arranged somehow classically, like a Greek or Roman goddess, and as if she were a bust. You know what's a bust? You know, in a very statuesque figure. Isabel judged a Juno or a Niobe. So, these are ancient classical figures, goddesses, and large white hands of a perfect shape, a shape so perfect that their possessor, preferring to leave them unadorned, wore no jewelled rings. Isabel had taken her at first, as we have seen, for a French woman. Okay. But extended observation might have ranked her as a German of high degree, perhaps an Austrian, a baroness, a countess, a princess. It would never have been supposed she had come into the world in Brooklyn. Now, what does it say? What does it suggest about the Europeans and the Americans, the dichotomy?
Being born in America
very commonplace, right? Not exciting enough, okay, not romantic enough. Yeah, but Europe, it signifies class, breeding, sophistication, elegance. You are almost on a pedestal. She looks like a bust to her. Why? Has she been reading too much? Has she experienced life firsthand? What I am trying to say is that has she experienced life firsthand in a very limited sort of way? Okay, it's all bookish. Okay, so whatever, even heavy books. Okay, but there are after all books. They are not real experiences. Caspar Goodwood, I think, has never read a book, or at least a book of this sort. Okay. What sort of a man is Caspar Goodwood? What, I mean, you think of him and whatever little you have seen of him. Do you think he is the book reading type? No. Okay.
Own business and
Okay.
He's more realistic and involved in like practical matters and
So very practical, and do you think he is somewhat like a representative American man, as opposed to people like Lord Warburton or Gilbert Osmond? In what way? I mean, do you think he is virile, in your face, muscular, strong, okay, strong in a very earthy sort of a way? Yeah? Okay, what sort of, this is the kind of man who would like fix up a thing, or when things are crumbling, and yes, he is not complicated at all.
straightforward.
So, a straightforward American, just like this straightforward young woman and young American woman. So, characters are important. I think, so this is what Henry James does with us. So, this is a common motive, this is a common theme in all his novels. You take a bunch of people, some of them are Americans, some of them are Europeans, pit them against one another. Americans are always, they fix a certain kind of pattern, and there is, Europeans are always like archetypal Europeans. They have these ideas, the old crumbling, representatives of an old crumbling civilization. Okay, so, and for an innocent American, a European is someone who is always on a pedestal. So, that is the kind. Anything you would like to say at this stage? Any comment?
Well, is Henry James romanticizing this dying or decaying nature of Europe, or is he just dismissing it as of decaying, not
He is
worth-
pitting the two against each other. Okay, so what happens when an innocent comes in contact with a dying civilization, young, vibrant civilization as symbolized by Isabel, and old decaying civilization as symbolized by Madame Merle and Gilbert Osmond. Okay.
It's kind of like,
like the innocent who's kind of trapped in this really confusing world of dying Europe, and that's where it goes wrong for her, because she kind of chooses the old order.
Okay, that is very interesting, because we will come back to that why him? Why does she choose him of all the people? Okay. So, therefore, I wanted you to read the first 30 chapters very thoroughly, because all the keys or all the clues to her character will be given in the first 30 chapters. How she interacts with people and how she behaves with people, and then what makes her choose the man who is definitely not for her, but why does she choose him? Is she, kind of masochistic kind of a choice, and then staying in that marriage. Okay, so there is a scene in chapter 15. Chapter 15, please go to that. This is the point where she has already refused Lord Warburton's proposal. Ralph confronts Isabel and asks her, what had you in mind when you refused Lord Warburton? Okay, and what does she say? And then he continues, what was the logic the view of your situation that dictated so remarkable an act? I didn't wish to marry him, if that's logic. No, that's not logic. What was it you said to yourself, and said is italicized. You certainly said more than that. You just didn't say to yourself, I don't want to marry him, but you refused him and you must have said something. Do you think here it's not just the question of a girl exercising her choice, but Ralph Touchett is also asking her to justify and intellectualize the choice. So, there is a discussion. When Elizabeth Bennet declines, who is that? Not Darcy, the other, the clown, Mr. Collins. Okay, is there a lot of justification? Do people come and ask?
Yeah, he says fashionable ladies first say no and then.
No, no, no. Does someone ask Elizabeth Bennet, perhaps her mother and her friend also Charlotte? Okay, but is it like this? What was the logic? What choices dictated your choice? Okay, what were you thinking? Okay, is it so? Thought is important. What the mental processes are extremely important in Henry James. So, it's not like I didn't like him, I thought he is a fool and I refused him. That's what Elizabeth says. That's how she justifies that he is just not my type, in other words. Okay, I don't, this is not what I want, a comfortable house and a family, not with this guy, I would rather not marry at all. Okay. But here there is a lengthy exchange between these two cousins. Why did you refuse? It's not like I want you to marry him, but just give me a sufficient convincing explanation of what were you thinking. Why do you call it a remarkable act? That's what your mother thinks so too. Warburton, such a thorough good sort, as a man I consider he has hardly a fault, and then he is what they call here no end of a swell. He has immense possessions and his wife would be thought a superior being. He unites the intrinsic and the extrinsic advantages. Okay, now nobody talks about Mr. Darcy like this. Yeah, why did you refuse him? He unites the extrinsic and the intrinsic qualities, although he does. Okay, but Jane Austen is definitely not into all that because she was not a literary critic. But here look at the choice of words. I refused him because he was too perfect then. I am not perfect myself and he is too good for me. Besides, his perfection would irritate me. That is ingenious rather than candid. As a fact, you think nothing in the world too perfect for you. Do you think I am so good? No, but you are exacting. All the same, without the excuse of thinking yourself good. 19 women out of 20, however, even of the most exacting sort, would have managed to do with Warburton. Perhaps you don't know how he has been stalked. I don't wish to know, but it seems to me that one day when we talked of him, you mentioned odd things in him. I will skip a few lines. I think not. I don't understand the matter and I am not conscious of any mission of that sort. You are evidently disappointed. You would have liked me to make such a marriage. Not in the least. I am absolutely without a wish on the subject. I don't pretend to advise you and I content myself with watching you with the deepest interest. And what is this interest? I am going to watch you. She misunderstands for a moment. She says, oh, so you are not really unhappy that I refuse him. Are you interested in me? Yes, there's the touch of vanity in her that every man who sees her is going to propose to her. Are you thinking of proposing to me? By no means. From the point of view I speak of, that would be fatal. I should kill the goose that supplies me with the material of my inimitable omelettes. Okay, so she is that goose. She is going to be a supplier of omelettes which are inimitable. What kinds of omelettes is she going to produce? Definitely not. Oh, that's an outrage. I am going to observe you and I am going to observe what kinds of omelettes would. The choices, yes, yeah, you're an interesting goose. Okay, I am not going to kill, you know, the killing the goose that
Lay the golden
lay
egg.
them, yeah, and that's the whole story is over once you finish. Once if I marry you, where is the excitement here? I have to watch you. What sort of choices or decisions you are, someone like you is going to make. That's important. What, and this is next. I use that animal as the symbol of my insane illusions. Hen, goose, yeah, that animal is my insane illusions. What I mean is that I shall have the thrill of seeing what a young lady does who won't marry Lord Warburton. Okay, so you know, after this, if your standards are really so high, then I have to see, yeah, who are you going to end up with? That's what your mother counts upon too. Ah, there will be plenty of spectators now. You are kind of a figure that you are going to be watched with lot of interest. So far, we were not we were just assuming this is a regular nice girl who is going to do very well for herself by getting a very nice husband, very well placed. And when Lord Warburton proposes and you refuse, then you are an interesting character. Before that, not really. But now there will be lots of spectators for you. Okay, it has become like you are like a performance for us. You are the entertainment. Okay, and this is how she is referred to throughout. Okay, people are going to look at us, the kinds of choices she is making. Don't you think character is important now? Yes, it's not just the plot, but is what sort of a character refuses, why, and then what will you do? So, and extremely intellectualized, because we are going to watch you and understand your mental process that goes on, that go on.
It's kind of interesting to see that Ralph is rooting for Lord Warburton.
Not really.
But doesn't he say that
You won't
can't
be
really
able
do
to,
better than.
of course, and she can't.
Yeah, and except Henrietta thinks that of
Casper Goodwin,
yeah.
yes, yeah.
Because I mean, she's from America, so she thinks he's the
Better man, yeah. Because she also knows him, and she, see, as we have been talking about, Caspar Goodwood represents everything that is all American masculinity. Okay, he is that kind of, so Lord Warburton is aristocratic, slightly, you know, he has political ideals. I was just talking about two important themes in Henry James, recurring always, money and marriage. Okay, so what these people want, lot of money. Henry James doesn't find anything wrong with money. So he is not one of those socialist kind of writers who think that money is tainted or money is the root cause of all. Money gives you freedom, according to Henry James. If you don't have money, that's the trouble. Major cause of trouble in life is lack of money, and then second theme is lack of a suitable partner, or if you have a partner who is not so suitable, then how to get rid of that. So, how to find a proper match, how to get married, how to stay married, and if marriage is not working out, how to get out of that marriage. So, marriage and money is important. Okay. If you leave him, what happens to money part of your life, financial part of your life? What money does she bring along? What money does he bring along with him? So, money and marriage, those are the central concerns in all his works. The other day I was talking to you about a short story, which is not exactly a short story, but it is a novella. I am sure you know literary genres. Novella is not exactly a little less than novel and little more than a short story. So, it's called Washington Square. Washington Square. You see, places are important, settings are important. So, Washington Square. And Washington Square is about a very wealthy young girl, Catherine, who is an only child. She is the only daughter, only child of a very wealthy single parent. Her mother died in childbirth. Father grows up so hating her because he believes he blames her for causing the death of the mother. Okay, so he just resents the presence of this little girl, and it so happens that she is also a very an extremely plain looking girl. Okay, she has no physical beauty to speak of. Okay, so there are two reasons to be dismissive of her. She caused the death of her mother, and she is also so plain looking. So there no young man of any standing would ever be interested in her. That's what father thinks, except for your money. If at all someone comes forward, it can't be because of you. You are not intelligent enough, you are not witty enough, you are not charming enough, definitely you are not pretty. So why would anyone be interested? And this thought is constantly drilled into a young girl's mind, that you are not good enough for anyone. So how would a child like this grow up? No self-esteem, total lack of self-esteem. She thinks she is not good enough. And then one day, an extraordinarily handsome young man starts paying her attention. And the father says, of course, you know, he is penniless and he wants your money. Yeah, he has no job. I have done a background check. Okay, so and I know that he can't stick to a job, and he doesn't even want to do a job, take up a job. All that he wants is marry, you know, a woman of substance, hook up with a woman of substance and live off her. And that's what I mean, he got a fool in you. Otherwise, look at him and look at yourself. Okay, look at this man who is, you know, an example of walking, talking example of a Greek god. Okay, he is so beautiful to look at, and look at yourself. Why do you think anyone like him would be interested in you if not for your money? Because he has a background, like he doesn't work, he is not trained to work, he will only live off you. So I forbid this alliance. Okay. I know it will break your heart, because this is the first and the last time you get any attention from any man. So he says all these things to her, but still you are better off without him, because he is a gold digger, a fortune hunter of sorts. So let him go. And she refuses. She actually believes that he loves her, and she goes to him, and he says that all those pretty things that men like him say, I'll die without you and things like that, and I know you, because of my social position, your father obviously thinks very ill of me, but I am not the sort. So she said, okay, so let's prove it. My father is definitely going to disinherit me after this, but let's elope. Okay. And he says, okay, fine. And she leaves home at night, and she suitcase packed and all, and she goes to this particular point. Washington Square is the street where there are houses. Okay, so they have this enormous mansion, you know, all these long winding staircases and beautiful house, and you know, extremely wealthy setup. And she goes in the middle of the night with just one suitcase, and there is no sign of that young man. Literally, he has ditched her at the altar. Okay, so he doesn't turn up. She comes back, and the father is there, and he says, oh, so you're back. Now, she is doubly tainted. Okay, so you are ugly and you're silly, and now you have lost your morals too, because you are the kind of girl who can just elope, and you have been ditched by a man, a scoundrel like that, because after all, what have you got now to offer him? That's your worth. After that, father also he's getting old, and he starts falling ill very frequently, and he dies. She falls into all this money. Okay. But what does all this, I mean, I am not going to give away the end now. If you are interested in this story so far, do read it. Okay. What is at the center of this story? What are the two themes? Money and marriage. Money and marriage, and also third thing, that is again a very recurring thread that runs through all his works, betrayal. Okay, human betrayal. Okay. So you never know what sort of life Henry James must have had, that these things are so important. There is always a character who the central character seems to trust implicitly And that's the character, the Judas complex. Did I talk about the Judas complex at the beginning of the presentation? Yes. So the Judas complex. Okay. So there is always a character who is going to betray you. So perhaps that's what Henry James had seen, people going through that, and this is something that is constantly featured in all his works. I will give you another example. It's called The Wings of Dove. I think I referred to this also. The Wings of Dove. Now, what is it about? It's about two English lovers, the man and a woman. They are very much in love, true love, and they want to marry, and the only problem is lack of money. Okay, they don't have enough money to start a family or to set up a house. Okay, and you need money. That's Henry James is very clear about it. You need money. All right. Now, what do? So, in walks this young American woman, okay, and very pretty, extremely wealthy. She befriends this English lady. And this English woman finds out that this young American woman has a heart condition and she is gradually dying. Now, what could be the solution here? What kind of a setup? Now, you tell me the story. What could have happened? Make the lover fall in love with this dying woman, then what will happen? They will end up getting married. She is anyway going to die soon. 1 year, 2 years, how does it matter? She is going to die soon. Okay, her condition is totally beyond cure. She is going to die, and then what happens? We are going to get all the money. Okay, perfect setup, and this young woman, she will get happiness for 2 years also, because everyone knows she is dying, so no one is interested in her anyway. So she will, her dying years would be good. So why aren't we doing a favor to everyone concerned? That's the idea. And this best friend, so-called best friend, she plots for her lover and this young woman to get married. They do get married, okay, and somehow this secret comes out that this woman is involved with her husband in some way, has been involved, and they knew about her condition, that she is going to die. And this American woman, she realizes that she has been betrayed, yeah, and what does she do? What should she do? Okay, yeah, that's some, perhaps a modern woman would do. Okay, leave everything to charity, yeah. She doesn't, she just dies away, leaving everything in his name. She realizes, she understands what's happening. She knows after my death, my husband is going to marry my best friend who has betrayed me. She is a very nice person, and she thinks, okay, so I got a few months with him where I felt that someone has really loved me, because he was very affectionate towards her. He pretended, but he was also good to her, and that's her way of thanking them. And she leaves all her money, and that's the dilemma. Can these two people, can ever be the same for these two people after getting this money? They got what they wanted. He is free, she is free, they have the money. And that's the plot, okay. They know it very well. Yeah, they know that she knew. So there is nothing. See, everything is very open. But then, what sort of a writer does he come across now? Marriage, money, yes. Betrayal, yes. But what the overarching picture? Human psychology. Relationships, which is there in everything. But do you think there is a strong moral center here? Yeah. And what is that moral center?
Not really good or bad, but a sort of grey shade. Like people are not things are not necessarily give and take. There are certain areas where you can't actually justify the acts of the characters.
Yes, there are, good. So things are not always black and white. It's not just plain give and take. Okay, there are certain grey areas there are certain boundaries which shouldn't be crossed. Okay, so just because you know she is going to die, so let her die, but don't take advantage of her. That's the idea.
Ma'am, but isn't that sort of black and white, ma'am? How is that grey? Because I mean, we know who is on the wrong here and
Who's right?
who is right.
Yes.
No, they are still
action.
They are still good people. You
Yeah,
see,
they're still adding
they have
an
just
element of
human
goodness.
frailty. So
How
that's
are they adding an element of
by taking care of her in her last days. She's being good friend and
yeah.
he's taking care of her.
The so-called anti-hero in Washington Square, he may not necessarily be an embodiment of grey characters. He is a blackguard. He is anyway a worthless, useless man. Okay, but what about her father? Okay, who always acts as if I am whatever I am doing, it's for your own good. Okay, I am protecting you from the big bad wolves of the world outside. But is he really doing that? Is that the way to raise a daughter? Yes. And the father is a very good man. He is a doctor by profession. He has saved several lives. He has done many good things in life. He is involved with lots of charities and all. He is a very nice person. Okay. But there you know, deep down in every human heart there lurks some kind of an evil, a hardness, and that's what he is concerned about. So, good people, but somehow in a situation where the worst comes out. Okay, so the same thing happens here also, in the Wings of Dove. Okay, now Madame Merle and Gilbert Osmond, now what are their motives? And then I continue when Ralph Touchett tells her, there will be plenty of spectators. We shall hang on the rest of your career. Now what is this? Your career? The same one where he is having a discussion with, is it chapter 18? Chapter 15, sorry. Chapter. No, we are talking where he calls her a goose and who is going to, yeah, 15, chapter 15. Okay, there will be plenty of spectators. We shall hang on the rest of your career. Got it? I shall not see all of it. Why? Yeah, he accepts his death. But I shall probably see the most interesting years. Okay, and you are going to, you know, whatever next 4 or 5 years you are going to, and I am going to live for, okay, those will be the most interesting years of your life also. Okay, because you are going to make some choice, some kind of a choice, and let us see what are those choices. Of course, if you were to marry our friend, you would still have a career, a very decent, in fact, a very brilliant one. Who is this friend? Warburton. But relatively speaking, it would be a little prosaic. Now we are again, he has the key to her character, don't you think? Lord Warburton is such a straight choice. Any woman would say yes to him, especially a woman like you who are so, well matched, perfect couple, a toast of London society. And it would be so prosaic, what a dull choice, such a predictable choice. Okay? But a person like you is unpredictable, and that is the interest. So, that is what Henry James is telling us. Beauty lies, interest lies when characters make unpredictable choice. In any, do you think a Jane Austen novel would end with Lord Warburton proposing and Isabel Archer accepting, and they live happily ever after? Okay? Predictable end, no? Interesting choice would have been, interesting plot twist would have been if Elizabeth Bennet turns down Darcy and ends up with Wickham. Okay, but there the most foolish of all sisters, she elopes with Wickham. Okay, but then that's expected, na? Yeah, that's how a fool would behave. A smart girl wouldn't. Okay, so but when a smart girl ends up with a villain, a thoroughly wicked, evil guy, that's the twist. So, yeah, so but relatively speaking, it would be a little prosaic. So, prosaic is predictable, unromantic, totally unimaginative, not unimaginable, but unimaginative. Yeah, this was expected. It would be definitely marked out in advance. It would be wanting in the unexpected. I am extremely fond of the unexpected. So, I like things which are unpredictable. And now that you have kept the game in your hands, I depend on your giving us some grand example of it. So, you have to now give a grand example. You are the act now and we are the spectators. I do not understand you very well, but I do so well enough to be able to say that if you look for grand examples of anything from me, I shall disappoint you. You will do so only by disappointing yourself, and that will go hard with you. Okay, she says there are other things a woman can do. She need not marry at all. There are so many things. There is nothing she can do so well. But you are of course so many sided. If one is two sided, it is enough. You are the most charming of polygons. Okay, so now there is a structure. He gives her a figure. You are a polygon. You are not just a three-dimensional figure. There are so many sides to you. You want to see life, you will be hanged if you do not, as the young men say. I do not think I want to see it as the young men want to see it, but I do want to look about me. You want to drain the cup of experience. Now, what does it mean? Drain the cup of experience, see lot more of the world. That is true for all of us, many of us, but drain the cup of experience, exhaust all kinds of experiences. It is not like whether she is willing only for the happy experiences or she is pining only for the charming sides of life, like a Jane Austen heroine. Again I keep coming back to it. She wants to experience life with all its ups and downs and the good and the ugly. We have talked about it in Goethe when we were doing Faust. I want to experience it all. Dr. Faustus, Marlowe's Dr. Faustus, he wants to get the best, the wisest, the most intellectual. He wants to become the most intellectual person on the world, the most beautiful woman, Helen of Troy. That is not what Goethe's Faust seek. He wants to experience life. That is what our heroine is accused of doing. You want to see, but not to feel. I do not think that if once a sentient being, one can make the distinction. I am a good deal like Henrietta. The other day when I asked her if she wished to marry, she said, not till I have seen Europe. That is Henrietta. I too do not wish to marry till I have seen Europe. You evidently expect a crowned head will be struck with you. That is synecdoche, no? Crowned head, some king would marry you. No, that would be worse than marrying Lord Warburton.
Isabel's reaction earlier is interesting, how she calls the cup of experience a poisoned drink.
No, I do not wish to touch the cup of experience. It is a poison drink. I only want to see for myself. Well, she is now, do not you think now they are dealing with metaphysics and over intellectualizing the whole thing, okay, and getting into the realms of obscurity. Okay. So, this is what Henry James is all about. This is how he constructs his plot. Okay. So, intellectualize too much, think too much, discuss too much, and what does it all lead to? Nothing. It is just that this is a young woman who really doesn't, she knows what she doesn't want, but does she know what she does want? She does not know.
And this conversation almost feels like Ralph has her figured out better than she knows herself.
True.
Everyone's been doing that to her.
We all think that she doesn't know what she
wants. But isn't that true? Because she really doesn't know, and people try to figure her out. But that is true in all Henry James's novels, where people just do not have conversations. People try to figure each other out. People try to read each other's minds and delve deep into the psyches. So, it is not just enough that they know the basic motivations and the justifications of choices and all. They want to probe into the psyche of other people, and that is how. So, therefore, this kind of dialogue. And then one of the last lines in the same chapter, you have told me the great thing that the world interests you and that you want to throw yourself into it. Her silvery eyes shone a moment in the dusk. I never said that. I think you meant it. Don't repudiate it. It's so fine. I don't know what you are trying to fasten upon me, for I am not in the least an adventurous spirit. Women are not like men. No, women rarely boast of their courage. Men do so with a certain frequency.
She keeps disagreeing with everything he says about her. He'll say this is how you are and she immediately disagree, and then she'll sort of argue herself in a circle, and then he'll say something else and she'll disagree.
Yes. So,
Because she seems really
she seems to disagree with Lord Warburton, with Caspar Goodwood and Ralph Touchett, people who mean well. But what happens when she comes in contact with Madame Merle and she starts falling in line with everything that Madame Merle says. Okay, so she agrees. So, she has sort of, now I also want to, at this point I want to ask you, what is her background? I mean, we know that she was found in Albany by this quirky aunt of hers, and she is found reading, and she is her late sister's daughter, Mrs. Touchett's late sister's daughter. Who was the father? Yes, yeah. Father is a sort of bohemian for those period, for those times. Okay. He was a sort of an intellectual. He was also a kind of person who was non-conformist. In a different way. Must be one of the early transcendentalists. Okay. Must have lived in a commune. If you just we want to construct the her ancestry. So, perhaps she is one of those children. So, she does not have that burden of conventionality. Okay. Anyway, she is an American, so it is not, she does not have history in her DNA, she does not have the burden of the past in her DNA, that is the, but on top of it she was also raised by a set of parents who were quite unconventional. Okay. And the father who read a lot and who was not very most conventional of all fathers, and then he also gambled away whatever he had. So, the girls were raised more or less in in genteel poverty, as they say. Okay, so they did not have much to throw about, but that did not affect their self esteem at all. Okay, they had their other things and pursuits and interests. So, they were brought up in a certain way. They were not they never traveled, they never went out of the small towns or but for Isabel, books were her window to the world, because that is how she gained her experience, and perhaps now that she has got the opportunity, she wants to explore the world. So, that could be. And do you think there is a bit of a gambler in her? Yeah.
She's doing that with all the rich suitors.
Yes.
She's making a bet that she will get somebody who will satisfy her needs of being free and free of spirit.
Yet
Yes.
she claims that she is not adventurous.
Yeah, she claims that she is a non-adventurous, but deep down we understand that it's not like she is not ready to marry. She does marry, okay, and she turns down Caspar Goodwood once more. He says, I will come back. He comes back, but then again he is refused. And then she finds Gilbert Osmond, and then there is marriage. The Madame Merle and Isabel, conversation between them. That's very crude of you. When you have lived as long as I, you will see that every human being has his shell and that you must take the shell into account. Do you get that? Chapter 19. That's very crude of you. When you have lived as long as I, you will see that every human being has his shell and that you must take the shell into account. By the shell I mean the whole envelope of circumstances. Now, don't you think this is again being very obscure? Envelope of circumstances and a shell, and every human being has a shell of circumstances. Pragya, do you get that? Yes. There is no such thing as an isolated man or woman. We are each of us made up of some cluster of appurtenances. What shall we call? Ourself. Again, this is very German philosophy, no? Self, very European. We are women talking about the concept of selfhood. So, what makes a self? What makes an authentic self? Okay, and they are talking about that. Where does it begin? Where does it end? It overflows into everything that belongs to us, and then it flows back again. I know a large part of myself is in the clothes I choose to wear. I have a great respect for things. Okay, so things define me. So, if you are, suppose I ask you to define yourself. So, I know a large part of myself is in the clothes I choose to wear. I have a great respect for things. Oneself for other people is one's expression of oneself and one's house. So, these are the things that define people like Madame Merle. The clothes, house, okay, one's furniture, one's garments, the books one reads, the company one keeps, these things are all expressive. Again, we are getting into the realm of German philosophy, expressiveness of objects. We choose objects to express ourselves. The kind of clothes and the house, the car we drive, okay, in today's culture. So, now this is old Europe talking. Do you think there is something of old Europe here? Why?
Because it's not really talking about individuality. It's talking about how you can't really be separate from anybody else.
Things, okay. There is no question of inner subjectivity, okay, or the words that we use, agency, your own agency, your own authenticity. These things don't really. Lionel Trilling has written a seminal book called Sincerity and Authenticity. I am going to soon, you were talking about is there going to be theory for this course? Here plenty of it. Okay. So, Lionel Trilling talks about, he has given us a seminal book, Sincerity and Authenticity. Two distinct terms, although we may often use them interchangeably. He is very sincere and therefore authentic. Do you think?
Here we have two women talking about self, and
One woman expresses herself only in terms of
yeah.
extrinsic
No,
setups,
I
yes.
was asking, all these are materialistic aspects.
Yes.
And if instead of two women, if it were two men, would they be talking about self in terms of things or?
Maybe, but in Henry James, perhaps it's an American male, he would be talking about. Yeah. So, Caspar Goodwood pitted against Gilbert Osmond. I am sure if you write an imaginary conversation between them, they would be talking like this. Although Caspar Goodwood is no intellectual, he cannot articulate himself in such terms. Gilbert Osmond, why does he impress Isabel so much? He has nothing. Okay, he is very clear about that. He has nothing, but he has lot of charm. He has lots of sophistication. He has the burden of that old order. Okay, but that's not just, I mean, she's not such a superficial person that she falls for the first man who carries a burden of European history. Okay, it's not, that's not the reason. We'll come to that soon.
And even if a man were to talk about, let's say, power or status, at the end of the day, it's still a result of money. And that way, it doesn't make it that much different from the objects that Madame Merle talks about. It's all still a result of money.
Let me continue. This was very metaphysical. Now they are into the realms of metaphysics, not more so however than several observations Madame Merle had already made. Isabel was fond of metaphysics, but was unable to accompany her friend into this bold analysis of the human personality. I do not agree with you. See, here also she does not agree. Okay. I think just the other way. I do not know whether I succeed in expressing myself, but I know that nothing else expresses me. So, I am not clothes or house or furniture or books, I am me. Nothing that belongs to me is any measure of me. Just because I have money does not necessarily mean that is the measure of me. Okay, I am much more than that. Everything is on the contrary a limit, a barrier and a perfectly arbitrary one. Certainly the clothes which, as you say, I choose to wear do not express me, and heaven forbid they should. You dress very well, Madame Merle lightly interposed. Possibly, but I do not care to be judged by that. My clothes may express the dressmaker, but they do not express me. To begin with, it is not my own choice that I wear them. They are imposed upon me by society. I live by certain conventions, therefore I dress, and I dress well because perhaps I can afford, but that does not necessarily define me, they do not express me. Should you prefer to go without them? Madame Merle enquired in a tone which virtually terminated the discussion. What can you answer to that? How can you answer to that? But what is this? If we are talking about the metaphysics of it, the obscurity of conversation. Now see, do not you think this is a very intellectual conversation? Do you think Elizabeth and Jane Bennet would have this kind of conversation? What defines you? What is myself? What expresses you? The things that they will only talk about, yes, pretty clothes, beautiful houses, carriages. She may not get carried away by those things, it is not the only thing, but if you have those things, all the more better. Okay, that is the thing. So, that is the end of your quest, that is the end of your journey, you have it and you are happy. But but what happens when you have a conversation like this? So, would you rather go without your clothes? What do clothes here indicate? Social standing, also social conventions. Okay. So, the idea is that all of us carry certain codes. So, we are bound by certain codes and conventions and certain kinds of set of so called social conventions and conduct which cannot just be thrown aside or cast aside. So, we are bound by these things. So, according to Madame Merle, that although you may try to be yourself, but in spite of that, whatever freedom you want to choose to express yourself, whatever way you want to express your freedom and you want to express your authenticity, etc., you are still a part of this society, you still have to continue living in this particular society. So, these things have to be considered, the house, the furniture, the society you keep, these are important parts of any personality. Any questions or comments? So, the concept that money brings along a certain degree of freedom, yes, it does. okay, but at the same time you can't let go of conventions. So, freedom is there, and that is new America. Okay. And let us also assume that, you see, how was this money coming to America, to the American society? Well, the old order, the European order was crumbling, okay, because it was a feudal kind of society, and feudalism, as you know, in that, by that period in history, it was already crumbling. Okay. What did the Americans symbolize? Hard work, freedom, okay, democracy, anyone, American dream, the great American dream, industry, yeah, free labor, free capital, okay, capitalist society. So, it was not, people were not constrained by the fact of their birth or ancestry. Anyone can, by hard work, by industry, by determination, by education. Again, you have to think of the great Gatsby. The idea was that anyone can come up in life. Okay. So, the old order versus the new order, okay, and that was at the core. But then again, Henry James is not, Fitzgerald was still to come, and he is at the cusp, he is somewhere there, okay, and he is still. So, he belongs to that period where when people started questioning certain established orders, so they were not accepting anything. Yeah. So, he is still there, that where Europe is crumbling. By the time of Fitzgerald, we already know that the American dream has its Achilles heels, but during the time, by the time of till the time of Henry James, American dream was still something to cherish, something to look for. Okay, so, that is the period in literature and history. Any comments? And this is what he says about London. We are talking about his notebook entry. The other day we were talking about how he talks about London and city, and he continues, oh yes, the United States, a country without a sovereign, without a court, without a nobility, without an army, without a church or clergy, without a diplomatic service, without a picturesque peasantry, without palaces and castles or ruins, without a literature, without novels, without cathedrals, without sport, without fox hunting or country gentlemen, okay, and this is what it sees America as. Okay. All this results in their naivete and their innocence. Okay. All these things are not there. So, London, although European, a part of Europe, as you were pointing out yesterday, it still represents everything that is very pleasant, which is so un-American, and he is ready to live in England because he changed his citizenship to British citizenship, okay, because of all these things. Okay. And because these are his personal thoughts, and although in his works we come across a slightly different thing, the corrupt versus the innocent American, but personally he thought very highly, he regarded London very highly, and London as a breath of fresh air amidst Europe. Okay. Although it may be Europe, but London is London. Okay. And this is what we will continue with when we look at how Isabel viewed London. All right. So, let us end here today.